You guys, I talked about this before. I was talking about it, but it just keeps coming up. And there were some cases that I was going to discuss at my last little update, which those of you who attended that realize I never got to the cases. So I'm going to bring it back up here because it just keeps coming up. And it's about buying, selling, and renting outside of your brokerage. So how many of you guys buy investment property outside of your brokerage or as part of your business? A few of you? Yeah, okay. How many of you have investment property that you rent out? A few of you? Yeah, you guys are in the real estate market. So I imagine most of you guys have, isn't that what Paul always says, buy real estate? So I'm sure that you guys have, buying real estate, renting it out, purchasing things, turning them over, selling them, these kind of things. So I need for you guys to consider a few things. First of all, insurance, do you have it? Probably not. If you're doing it outside your brokerage, there's no coverage for that, guys. So E&O is not going to cover you if you have a buyer or a seller or a tenant who's not happy with you and they sue you. Your E&O is not going to cover you if you're running this thing outside your brokerage. They cover you for things that you need a real estate license to do. Any individual in the state of New Mexico can sell their own house, they can buy their own houses, they can rent out their own properties. That does not require a real estate license, and that's why you have no E&O coverage for that. Your license, will it be impacted? Maybe, and we're going to talk about that in just a minute. And you got to think about the liability for the brokerage. And I've talked about that before too, but we'll talk about it for just a second in more detail. I want to bring up just a couple of cases, and they're old cases in New Mexico, but there's still good law. There's still good law in New Mexico. This particular case said that what happened in this case is that they said that this broker, the real estate commission said that this broker violated some broker duties. And they brought, somebody brought the consumer insurer, brought an action against that broker, and the real estate commission took action against that broker. And the broker appealed the decision, and it went all the way up to an appellate court in New Mexico. And what the appellate court said is that he was not acting as a real estate broker during the sale of that real estate contract, and therefore we conclude that the real estate commission has no jurisdiction over him. Now, it was interesting because I got a phone call on the hotline from a broker. He has a seller, a buyer in a transaction, and the seller breached the contract. And the buyer broker filed some weird thing with the county. He shouldn't have filed that weird thing because he should have sued on the contract and filed his judgment. But he went down and filed some strange thing to cloud the title. And so when the seller turned around and wanted to sell the property to somebody else, this came up in the title work. And they called the broker and they said, we want you to remove this from the file. We can't sell our property with this weird thing that you filed. And he said, no, you breached the contract. I have damages. You want to pay me? I'll get rid of it. But otherwise, I'm not getting rid of it. So where did he call? Where did the consumer call next? The real estate commission. Make this broker get this thing off my property or find him in violation or do something, right? So the real estate commission reached out to the broker and said, you better get rid of this thing that you filed. And the broker reached out to me and said, are they allowed to do this? I was a buyer in this transaction. It had nothing to do with my real estate license. It wasn't inside the brokerage at all. I wasn't acting as a brokerage. Do they have the right to do this? And this is where this comes in, this analysis. I can't tell him definitively yes or no, but I can tell him what the analysis is. And I know that that's frustrating to people that call the hotline sometimes when I'm just kind of giving you the whole picture. I just want to know, yes or no, Ashley. We don't have to talk about this for 30 minutes. I don't need the whole analysis, Ashley. I just need yes or no, right? I can't give you yes or no, guys. I'm not a judge, I'm not a jury. I can only analyze it from different perspectives from you, right? That's all I can really do. So anyway, I did the same for him. And it was interesting because after I did that, he must have called the real estate commission because then I get a call from the real estate commission. And I always know I'm in trouble when that happens, right? And usually what Wayne would do is he would get all of the investigators in the office at the same time and he called me. And I'm in here with all of the investigators, Ashley, and you're on speakerphone. I'm like, okay, what's the topic today? So he said, I said, so Lynn Carter, I love Lynn, he's a great guy, but he said, we have jurisdiction over real estate brokers all the time, 24/7, no matter what they do, we have jurisdiction.
At this point.
Right this second. And you're at least dinner in March, tonight at dinner, in your bedroom, they have jurisdiction over you. Just saying, Sandra, all right? So that's their position. And I said, wait a second, Lynn. I said, that's totally contrary to New Mexico law. That's not what New Mexico law says. It says that you have to be acting as a broker at the time that at the time that in question, in order for you guys to get jurisdiction over them. Now, Basat said that this particular person, under that fact pattern, was not acting as a broker. In this case, they looked at a similar case, not a similar situation, but a different case, but the same issue, and they were looking at, again, whether or not he had held himself out as a broker. And it says that the broker has the burden of showing that there's no possibility of misunderstanding or confusion as to his status when he purports to act for himself. So there's a whole analysis that they have to go through. And it's not this blanket, we have jurisdiction over you 24/7 no matter what you're doing, right? And so I sent both cases to Lynn, and I said, there's got to be further analysis, Lynn. That's just not the way what the law says. Now, what is really interesting to me is that the Real Estate Commission has created a requirement that you guys, on the selling side of the transaction, that you disclose the fact that you were a broker, right? If you were leasing out property, you were selling property, you were required to disclose the fact that you were a broker. There is no similar requirement on the buyer side of the transaction, but since I've been running my big mouth about this, they actually are going to create a requirement such as that on the buyer side of the transaction. Which, I get that because, you do have an advantage over your everyday consumer who doesn't do real estate, right? And it's good for them to know that, right? Just like it's good for you or anyone else to know if you're dealing with a legal issue that I'm an attorney, right? It's good for you to know that this is not exactly a level playing field, right? So if they want to go out and get their own broker to deal with you, Sandy Lee, that they can do that, right? So I think it is important for them to know. But what I find interesting about this is if the commission, I imagine at some point when a broker challenges the Real Estate Commission's jurisdiction, it may come up that the broker disclosed that they were a broker. And why did they disclose that they were a broker? Because the rule says they have to disclose that they're a broker, right? So it will be an interesting and kind of fun case, fun for me, because I don't think there's any way that they're going to win that argument, guys. I don't think, well, I know, I'm pretty confident that they can't create their own jurisdiction. Right? They can't say, you're required to tell everybody you're a broker, and then we use the fact you told everybody you're a broker to say we now have jurisdiction over you because you held yourself out as a broker. You see that? Yeah, so I don't think that's going to fly, but it hasn't been litigated in Mexico, but I don't think that would fly for a second. So I think there's going to have to be something more than what's just required under the rules, right, of just disclosing the fact that, hey, I'm a broker. And I get a lot with brokers, I get them disclosing a lot more than that when they're telling people, and here's my QB, and here's my brokerage, and here's my phone number, broker's phone number, and here's my QB's phone number, and their home phone number, and their vacation home, and they're giving all sorts of information that goes well beyond what they have to disclose per the rules. And again, I think that creates problems for you guys if you're trying to keep this out of your brokerage. All of these kind of things that you may be doing is creating not only liability for your brokerage, even though you're not running these things to your brokerage, but it's also creating this jurisdictional issue for the Real Estate Commission, okay? So you just need to be cognizant of that. I'm not telling you not to run things to your brokerage. I'm just saying that I know a lot of brokers don't run it through their brokerage, and yet they're creating liability for their brokerage, unbeknownst to the brokerage, and they are creating jurisdiction for the Real Estate Commission if something should go south. Handing out your business card that has your brokerage name on it to a buyer or seller of your own property, right? They call the voicemail, and they gave you a voicemail that says, hi, this is John Doe with ABC Realty. Using forms, of course, with your broker name on it, any of their marks, dropping off paperwork or payments off to the brokerage, telling your tenant, just stop by the brokerage and drop off payments at the brokerage, right, for your rent. Identifying your associate broker on paperwork and contracts. Like I said, that's not required by the rules to identify your QB if you're not using, running it through your brokerage. So just be aware of this kind of stuff, because this is just the status of the law as far as these issues are concerned. And I encourage qualifying brokers to educate their brokers. I know some brokerages have policies that you will not do things outside my brokerage, because I know that somehow I'm gonna get pulled into that lawsuit, and yet I had no idea what you were doing, right? I'm not gonna be able to stay on top of that. So I just have an internal policy that says, no, you will not be doing anything else at the brokerage. And you can have that policy, everyone have their policy. So you guys just keep that in mind, because this just continues. I get calls about this on a regular basis.